Episode 107, where mindfulness meets emotions with Molly Claire. Hello, my friend. I am so thankful to have you here again listening to the Mixed Faith Relationship podcast. I love that you join me every week. If you're new, welcome. I'm so happy to have you here. And if you've been here a long time, thank you that you keep showing up. I love it. Today I'm really excited. I have a guest with us that I know that you're going to learn so much from. Um, Molly Claire, she is one of my coaching colleagues, and I learned about her from the Life Coach School. And I've listened to her podcast and many of the things that she does. And the thing I love about Molly, she just has like this spunk and this energy that's just contagious and the greatest smile. I
Mm.
love her energy. And she's amazing. She is a seven-figure business builder. She's the best-selling author of The Happy Mom Mindset. And she's also the founder of the Masterful Coach Collective. And she's a single mom of three. And Molly has this gift of empowering women to believe in their abilities and creating a life of balance. So, Molly, welcome. We are so happy to have you here.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. I just think this is such an important thing that you speak to, supporting people in navigating something that's really challenging, right? That they never anticipated. So I'm really happy to be here.
Well, thank you. And I'm so excited for my listeners to hear all your great wisdom today. So, but before we get into that, tell us a little bit about you.
Oh, well, it's so funny when you were talking about my spunk and my smile. Sometimes I think my kids just they might get a little embarrassed about me because I wake up in the morning and I'm, happy to see everyone and we've got music playing in the house, but it's a good way to live, I think, to try to bring joy and have a little more fun more often. So I always tell my kids, maybe I'll embarrass you sometimes, but trust me, you'll be glad that I'm happy and that we have fun. So,
Yeah. You don't want a
um,
boring mom, right?
no, that's right. Yeah, but I mean, I live in the Dallas area. I have three kids. My oldest are now 21 and 19, which I can't believe. And then I have a 13-year-old daughter. We have a couple of dogs that I'm always debating if it's a good idea to have them or not because, just dogs and shenanigans. But yeah, and I mean, I love to hike and be outdoors and move. I've always been a pretty high energy person, and I love in this work that I do, I love that I get to bring energy to women. Mostly I work with women and really helping women to just you know, find their joy, find their power, and be able to create things in their life that really matter to them. Because I think as women, we don't think about that very often. We think about everyone else and taking care of everyone else, which is great. And
Yeah.
I'm an advocate for that. And what I've learned in my life is that if I am not cared for, if I am not happy, if I am in the dumps, if I'm not nourished mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, I cannot give to others. So that was a long spiel,
I
but
love it.
that's me. And I hope that everyone listening here, either gender and women listening here, just remember that you've got some great stuff inside of you. So we want to let it come out.
I love that. Okay, and we are almost exactly, I've got a 21-year-old daughter,
Yeah.
a 19-year-old son, and a 14-year-old son. So our kids are like,
Okay.
we're the same. Yeah,
Right there. Oh my gosh. It's
love it.
so fun. I love my adult children. They're just fun
Yeah.
human beings to me. And I had everyone here last weekend. My middle son was visiting and we did like a ropes course together and we just had a
Oh,
great time.
fun.
So
Love it. Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, fun ages. And I love what you were saying about self-care. I remember thinking years ago that self-care was selfish and debaucherous, and like I only thought of it as, something like getting a manicure and a pedicure, and you can see from my
Yes.
nails that I don't do that.
Well, here, take a look at
We're
mine.
twins.
We got the same thing happening there.
Love it. And
Mm-hmm.
just recognizing like I can't take care of other people if I don't
Mm-hmm.
find what brings me joy
Mm-hmm.
and my happiness. So so
And
so so important.
I think that's it. I mean, because I think a lot of times we can think self-care is selfish, and we can also put self-care in this box of like there's a new checklist now that we have to take responsibility for taking care of ourselves. And I
Yeah.
think what you said is so true. Like what about just thinking about what are some things I could do in my life that would feel a little more fun and easy and bring me joy? Maybe that's
Yeah.
self-care. Maybe it doesn't have to be this hard list that stresses me out,
Yeah.
but just joy. So
Well, and
it's a
even
big
thinking
deal.
of it is like when I'm eating foods that serve my body or
Mm-hmm.
even like clipping my fingernails or taking a
Mm-hmm.
shower instead of thinking of it as like a checklist or like when I'm
Mm-hmm.
exercising, it's like I
Mm-hmm.
am taking care of me. And
Yes.
I think like just opening up that we could
Yes.
talk about this for a long
I
time.
know, right? I know.
I
Yes.
love it. Um, so I would like to hear a little bit about your journey from being a single mom to building your
Mm-hmm.
business. We're gonna
Mm-hmm.
jump all over the place. Sorry about that.
Okay, I know. I'm like, how long do you have? I don't know what because so I'll give you the highlights, the very much the Cliff's Notes version, because I
Yeah.
know I want to make sure that I'm sharing with your audience, about what they really need, where mindset meets emotion, but it obviously relates. So, yeah, I found coaching when I was at a time in my life. I was struggling. I had been slowly recovering from chronic fatigue syndrome. I had my three little kids. My marriage had been struggling for a long time, and it wasn't any better at the moment, and I was kind of having a little bit of an internal crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And I did this short 20-minute coaching session, and I remember I was walking on my back porch, like pacing, and it was one of those moments where like everything was in slow motion. And I
Mm-hmm.
could see that there were something we were talking about from my past that I had been to therapy about, that I had dealt with. And yet in this moment, I was seeing it differently than I ever had. And I was seeing possibilities all in this moment.
Yeah.
And it was like, I remember thinking, oh my gosh, this is unbelievable. And this is what I want to do. Because I've always just, I mean, now I see, I was always meant to be a coach for sure, for many reasons, and have my own business. But that was kind of, the catalyst. And at that time, I was like, I know one day I want to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like, pretty soon, I got noticed that, the life coach school was doing one more training and the founder was teaching it. And I was like, okay, well, one day is right now. And it was like the timing was terrible. I didn't have the mental or emotional capacity to do it, but I did it. And oh my gosh, I'm so glad I did. I did the training. I went full force. I got certified as quickly as I could. I started my business. I started out working with moms, wrote my book. I got master certified. I started training coaches, and essentially, like, we'll fast forward basically over the last 10 years. I've just been, going through, of course, I'm single mom now, right? Like, so I went through um moving on to a new phase of my life, building my business. And what I'll say about all of it that I think really relates to your clients is over the last 10 years, I have really learned and understood how what I learned in that first coaching session has been expanded. And over this time of sifting through grief and sadness in the loss of,
Yeah.
my at the time 15-year marriage, another challenging relationship that I've experienced since then as well, and helping support my kids and building a business which challenges everything new. I mean, it's just been this unbelievable experience of challenges, but what I've learned is that like each of you listening, we as human beings have so much more strength and capacity than we realize. And I think the way we find it isn't by stressing ourselves out or spreading ourselves more thin, but rather by attending to our needs as a human being. What is the support we need mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and how are we gathering support around us? So that's kind of my big lesson learned. And what I do really now is I actually train coaches in a holistic master coach process where I'm helping them coaches to be equipped in supporting their clients
Yeah.
with these different areas and aspects. So I know that was a mouthful.
No, I love it.
Ask all your questions.
I
Yeah.
love it. Well, it makes me think, just what you were saying earlier. So it's as we are recording this today, it's springtime in New England, and I've got this beautiful ginkgo tree in my front yard. And
Mm-hmm.
I love the buds are just opening up. And every time I walk past there, I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
that little blossom, that bud has
Mm-hmm.
everything it needs to become this
Mm-hmm.
beautiful ginkgo leaf.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just
Mm-hmm.
fascinated with it. And
Mm-hmm.
when I walk by there, I'm like, and so do you, Chris Rich. So do you, all
That's
of us.
right.
All of us
That's
have
right.
that, what we need in us. And sometimes it just takes a
Yeah.
sometimes uh, it takes our experiences or
Yeah.
a coach or someone that can help you to find that because it's already
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, okay, I want to know, so as in mixed faith relationships, as my listeners are in, there are
Mm-hmm.
so many different emotions, like you were speaking to just a
Mm-hmm.
minute ago,
Mm-hmm.
that, like we've got worry, disappointment, concern, fear,
Mm-hmm.
judgment, overwhelm, anger, betrayal, grief, all of those, so many of those
Mm-hmm.
very human emotions that
Yes.
are hard to deal with.
Yes.
And I want to know all about this idea of mindfulness and emotions together. So
Yeah.
tell us about that.
Okay, so and I know you speak a lot to your audience about mindset, right? And
Yeah.
the power of our thoughts. And so I'll hopefully people have some of that as a foundation um as we talk about this. But so I think of it as this. We all to some degree know the power of our thinking, right? We understand and or we hear things like, what you focus on grows, what you think will be. The way we think about life creates our experience about life. And so we're all aware to some degree of the power of thinking. And sometimes I think we can mistakenly believe that if we and I'm trying to really I'm trying to preface this in a way that's relevant to where your clients are with their thinking. But I'll give you an example. Let's imagine that here I am in a mixed faith marriage and I'm discouraged. I'm feeling grief. I'm feeling all of this. And I get this idea that I just need to think more positively. And that way I'm thinking about the mixed faith relationship is wrong. Because I think at some point and at some level, some people do come up against that. Would you say that's the case that
Oh yeah.
sometimes
Yeah. I felt
the
like just change how I'm thinking about it. Just think happy thoughts.
Right, right, right. And what I'll say is there is value in looking at the ways you are thinking about a situation that is bringing added suffering, for sure. I think it's important to see, are the ways I'm thinking about this useful? Okay, so I'll just
Yeah.
like put a pin in that piece of it. And what I will also say is it is not helpful or healthy or kind to yourself, those of you listening, if you are trying to think positively as a way of sweeping your feelings under the rug, as a means of shutting down your feelings. Because your feelings, grief, sadness, devastation, those feelings you are experiencing, they really matter. And so I think that when we can find this balance of, okay, like, how is the way I'm thinking about this impacting me? For example, I'm thinking he needs to change, he needs to be different. And every time I think that, I'm fighting against reality,
Yeah.
right? That's an example of, okay, what other options are there? Maybe even some questions, right? Like, what if he doesn't change? What if, what would it be like if I could be a little more okay with what's happening, right? So
Hmm.
that's a specific example of ways you can use thoughts or thought work, cognition, mindset in a really useful way. And it doesn't discount or take away from the feelings I'm having, right?
Yeah.
So the feelings can be like, I'm feeling so much sadness and grief. And you know what? I'm just going to care about the fact that I feel that way. And we
Hmm.
can do things like journal about our feelings without any judgment. We can speak our feelings. We can cry. When we cry, it's very healthy, right?
Very
And so
cathartic.
it is. I
Yeah.
mean, and crying activates the parasympathetic nervous system. It's like it's there's a lot of power in it. So I hope as all of you are listening, it's very helpful to notice the ways that you are viewing and thinking about the situation that are not helpful for you. And this does not mean that your emotions, your feelings, the grief you're experiencing doesn't matter, because it does, and it's real.
Yeah. Yeah. I think about like just how I think most of us we are so kind to other people. We're great girlfriends, we're
Yeah.
kind to our kids, and thinking about like, would I ever treat someone else the way, like not
Yeah.
letting me
That's right. Well, and I'll recommend a book. I don't know if you've, recommended this before, but I think it's called The Grief Handbook. It's a purple book. You
oh,
can put it in the show notes. It's
yeah.
so good. And I think actually that book is a great example of seeing the value in emotions and processing them and grief. And
Yeah.
there's a line in the book, and I'll probably botch it, so I apologize like to the
We're
author, but
humans, it's okay.
right, but it says something like you can't fix an emotion problem with a thought solution, something like that.
Yeah.
But I think that's true, right? And when it comes to grief, when it comes to I think we don't realize. I know you've had Krista St. Germain on the podcast, right?
Hmm.
Speaking to grief. And I mean, all of you listening, in truth, if you thought your life and relationship and family was going to be one way and it is now different, there is grief there. Grief happens when
Absolutely.
we lose someone, grief happens when we experience divorce, and anytime, really truly, anytime something is different than we anticipated, there is a grief there. And that grief will stay and fester and expand unless we can just acknowledge and make a little bit of space for it and
Yeah.
process it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that just the idea that I think of grief as it's the loss of an expected outcome.
That's right.
That's,
Exactly.
and yeah, I think, yeah, a lot of times we don't recognize like we definitely are going through grief or trauma. This is something that it can be
Yes.
your experience. You definitely could be experiencing trauma in a situation like this.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and this is why, because the work I do with training coaches is covering all of these different aspects, because every human has these different pieces, right?
Yeah.
So, like your listeners right now, you all have ways in which it will be helpful for you to support yourself with mindfulness, with understanding how you're thinking about a situation. You will benefit from really paying attention to and caring about your feelings. And I know you've had Leah on the podcast, right? And like Leah and
Mhm.
Krista, they teach in my program, because all these elements, right, that Chris is sharing with you here on the podcast, they matter. And so, right, then there's the nervous system, right? Like, where are the pieces where you're having some nervous system activation and responding in ways, and then beating yourself up for it, when guess what? It's just your nervous system. It's just
Yeah.
what it does, right? And so I think the bottom line is, all of you listening, you're feeling a lot of emotions up and down all over the place. And it can be really easy to judge yourself or criticize yourself or believe something needs to be different. And in reality, we all experience this range of emotions, and hopefully everyone listening can be kind to yourself and have a little bit of hope that you are going to be able to sift through it. You are going to be able to figure it out.
I yes, I love that. A couple of things that will you just define? I think there's some words that sometimes that we hear, but people might not really.
Mm-hmm.
What do you what do you mean by mindfulness? Let's talk about
Mm-hmm.
what is that and what could that look like and how, well, I've got more questions for you after that.
Yeah, yeah. So I know, and it is like such a big topic, right? I'm like
Yeah.
trying to give these like touch points that work, for your clients, like in a practical sense right here. So if we break each down, so when I think about mindfulness, um, here is one. There are so many ways we can address it, and for sure, I do think working with a coach who can help you with it is really important. But
Yeah.
even, just your listeners, when you think about mindset or mindfulness, I think it can be very helpful to create a practice of becoming aware of the thoughts that are coming and going for you. And so, an easy way you can do this is you can journal about your thoughts every day and just notice the thoughts that are there. And in particular, if you do feel, if you're noticing some emotional reaction, it can be very helpful to pause, even put like your hands on your heart, right?
Mhm.
And just kind of notice, what am I thinking right now? And so I would say, while we could go a lot into it and a lot of solutions, just one tip I would give your audience is, if you can take the time to pause and notice thoughts that are coming and going without allowing them to overtake you, or without allowing the emotions that come along with them to flood you, it
Yeah.
allows you a little bit of opportunity to notice that the thoughts we have just come and go. Like, I'll give you an example that might be relevant to your clients, right? Maybe there are thoughts like, um, this is a disaster. This isn't what I wanted. My life might be ruined. What if this doesn't get better? How
This
can
isn't
this
what I
work?
signed up for. That was my
Right?
favorite one.
Yeah, this isn't what I signed up for, which, I mean, come on, talk about a thought that is just so much evidence that there's grief existing there,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so, with each of these thoughts, and anyone that your listeners are thinking of, there are going to be strong feelings with it. And if we think about this, so it's like we ask ourselves a lot of really kind of not very helpful questions a lot, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Like, how did this happen to me? Why is this still going on?
Why
Why can't I
me?
fix this? Why me? When is it going to get better? Right? And so when we ask things like, why me, our brain just like dishes up all these just like terrible thoughts, right?
Yeah.
Why me? And then it's like, oh, well, what kind of things can your brain offer up, right? Like, it could be like,
Some yucky ones.
everything always goes wrong for me. Maybe it's because of this choice or that, or I made this mistake. It's like we just like, oh, let's open up all the worst thoughts, and then we just spiral downward.
Hmm.
And so I think, and a perfect example would be when you're noticing, if you notice some kind of spiral or swirling down, just to take a minute to pause and be curious, like, what kind of thoughts am I having right now? And write them down and look at them for what they are, which is just thoughts.
Yeah.
Because when we don't make that space, it just seems inevitable that every day we're going to go into this swirl of why me, and this is terrible and everything's wrong. So
Yeah.
hopefully that's a more specific example of what your clients can actually do. Just notice you're going to have all these thoughts and all these questions, and they can spiral you down, but they don't have to. You can
Yeah.
also just notice them and make a little bit of space to see them. And that's going to allow you to feel a little more settled and grounded, rather than having those thoughts just overtake you.
Yeah. I think too, there's a lot of things that I think when I'm thinking of mindfulness, I think of it as just being present, being in the moment. And
Absolutely.
I think there are a lot of things, other things we can do too, like meditation. You mentioned journaling, having a practice of gratitude.
Yep.
Um, Also prayer. prayer is
Absolutely.
a beautiful way to be mindful. So sometimes, maybe, or, yoga, meditate, I
Mm-hmm.
love the Headspace app. There's so many different
Mm-hmm.
ways that to be mindful
Mm-hmm.
that fit in with a lot of the religious practices that people might already be, or even, like
Absolutely.
reading a scripture and just focusing on that little that
Mm-hmm.
thought for just
Mm-hmm.
a few minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, just yesterday I was out walking and I was noticing that I was kind of activated emotionally.
Yeah.
And I just was walking down the sidewalk and I started looking at the trees, like everything around me. And I just said to myself, you're safe right now,
Mm-hmm.
and I noticed the trees. I could see the leaves, thinking about it and just noticing. This goes back to just being present with what was around me, right?
Yeah.
And there can be so much gratitude in that, right? Just looking around
Mm-hmm.
and feeling grateful that the trees are there, that I'm safe, that I'm healthy, that I can move. So yes, all of those are great practices and ways that we can stay grounded emotionally. Yeah.
Okay. So, do you have other ideas on how we can combine like our existing spiritual practices with mindfulness or these different things that we've been talking about?
Yeah. So here's what I would say is I actually think it's a good idea for your listeners to just do a bit of an audit of their um, current spiritual or religious practices that they have in
Mm-hmm.
place for themselves and really find out and give yourself permission to question um, if that practice is helpful and either in general or even the way you're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So here's what I mean by this. Um, let's imagine that you have a practice of reading your scriptures every day, and yet you start to notice that when you're reading them, you're experiencing more discouragement, for
Mm-hmm.
example. It doesn't mean, oh, you shouldn't read scriptures because you're feeling discouraged. This is a bad idea. But I do think it's worth looking at. And then I'll talk about adding things in. I know that was your question, but I do
Yeah.
want to speak to this because I think it matters. I think it could be that, you may discover that like every time I'm reading the scriptures, it's kind of perpetuating these thoughts. It shouldn't be this way. It would be better if he were doing this with me, right? So it can kind of come with it, this swirl of not so helpful thoughts. So
Mm-hmm.
so the bottom line is I think evaluating and saying, okay, what are the spiritual practices I'm doing? Do they seem to be helping me or are they actually making this worse? And if they are, what about this practice needs to change so that it is uplifting, so that it does
Yeah.
lighten me, so that it feels better? Because you want to make sure you don't want to just take at face value, well, here are these things and I'm just going to do them and hope it gets better. Make sure that you're doing any kind of practice in a way that feels supportive of you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think too, I definitely experienced where I felt like, okay, so my husband's not doing these things, so I need to do more of it. I need to do
Mm,
my job and his job. And
mm,
looking back, that was exhausting. And I think I was
yeah.
so worried about creating the perfect spiritual experiences, to
Yeah.
bring my husband back or to with my kid. My
Yeah.
kids have all
Yeah.
left the church as well.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
focusing instead of trying to create the perfect spiritual experience for them, which is
Yeah.
exhausting
Yeah.
and and I was manipulating, I was creating these things that I was so
Mhm.
focused on creating it for them, I missed out on it for me. So I think
Mhm.
that's so important, figuring out, am I doing that? Why am I doing this? Am I doing this so I can
Mhm.
connect and so I can feel
Mhm.
the spirit? Or am I doing
Mhm.
this just, yeah, to check in? Am I doing this just because I know I have to? Or is this
Mhm.
something that I'm using as a way to meditate and to become closer to my heavenly parents. I think it's,
Yeah, yeah. Yes, and I mean I want to speak to that a little bit and just kind of share something that I think is worth thinking about is, most of your listeners believe in this idea of agency and choice being
yes.
so important, right?
Yeah.
It's like one of the most important things. And it's interesting how we can get kind of caught in this trap of of believing in that idea of agency being important in some ways. And yet, if other people in my life are making choices that don't fit in with the way things are supposed to be, I somehow have to fix and change that. And in a
Hmm.
way, it's first of all, let's just acknowledge, of course, we're going to think that way and feel that way. Of course, that's going to be normal because we want our family to be with us. We want our family to be happy, right? It comes from a good place. And
Yeah.
I think that the flaw in that thinking is that we can't we can't make choice for people. And in fact, it goes absolutely against what is core to like many of your listeners belief, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think there is actually a lot of power in opening up to like, what if I had a little more trust in God, in the universe, that like
Hmm.
everything is like, I don't have so much power or control that I can like control and manipulate the things around me. Of course, we want that, right?
Yeah. We
But
sure
I think
try.
we sure try. But I think when we can really bring together, like, okay, yes, like when I make choices in my spiritual practices that are nourishing for me, I can be the best person in my kids' lives, in my
Hmm.
spouse's life. I can do that. And I can trust them as a human being,
Yes.
and I can trust God, and I can really just release trying to control and fix everything, because what I know is really what my job is to connect with God and to be strong and powerful and connected spiritually. That's it. That's all.
Hmm.
Yeah,
I love that. I think, and there can be so much fear too. Like I gotta save them. I
absolutely.
gotta bring them back. And it's like, no, my job is to love them. My job
Yeah,
is to show up as the person that I want to be. And they have their
yeah.
journeys and I get to be here to just love them. And the Savior's job is to save, not my job. So it's not even something I can do. Um, okay, Molly, I love this. I love all these great things. Is there anything else that you want to add to any other thoughts that you want to share?
I mean, I guess I would just say to everyone listening that I think one of the best things that you can do for yourself and everyone else every single day is just to offer love and compassion. Like, offer yourself love and compassion when this is hard for you.
Yeah.
My daughter will come home from school. She's got all these emotions. She's all wound up. And the best thing I can do is just hug her and listen to her and tell her I care about the way she feels. And
Hmm.
I think as adults, we have the responsibility of doing that for ourselves. So I guess my hope is that all of you can have a little more love and compassion and attentiveness to caring about how you feel. Allow yourself to cry, allow yourself to feel all of it. And hopefully, we can extend a little more love and compassion to everyone around us, because we're all going through things that are really hard.
I,
Yeah.
yes, and just thinking of like, like I mentioned earlier, how would I treat someone else going through this? And to do that same
That's
thing
right.
for
That's
you.
right.
I
And
love it.
I something that has been a really good lesson learned for me as a mom, that I kind of remember the moment that I realized I was lacking this, and I felt kind of bad that I hadn't been doing as good of a job of this. But I think we can want to fix everything for our kids
Hmm.
or help them do something. Like, I know for me, obviously I want to support my kids and like doing whatever they want, and how can I help you? And that's kind of my nature. And I remember one of my kids, my son, one day he said, Mom, I really appreciate your help and I'm glad you believe in me. And sometimes it would be nice if you could just like be with me. And I
Mm,
just remember when he said this thinking, "Oh my gosh, like I'm doing what I believe I'm supposed to do as a mom, right?" And not that
yeah.
I was doing what I was doing was wrong by any
Yeah.
means, but I that has always stuck with me and something that I've taken in like I just be with the people in your life. Just be
Mhm.
with them and love them. And I think sometimes that's just what we all need.
That's
And then we
yeah.
all figure it out, right?
Yep. I love it. Oh, well,
So
Molly, thank you so much.
you're so welcome.
Okay, how can people find out more about you if they want to?
Yeah. So, so anyone that is a coach or interested in becoming a coach, certainly I would be the person for you, and all the rest of you as well. If any of this resonated, I mean, these are the things that I talk about all the time. So I have the Masterful Coach podcast, of course, that you can listen to. Anyone who is interested in diving more into this work and understanding it and understanding mindset, emotion, nervous system, and action strategies, you can just go to mollyclaire.com. I offer a master coach training, which equips people to be masterful coaches and understand these different elements. Um, I have, I mean, everything is there. It's like, I know your audience isn't really coaches primarily, but I offer a master coach training that's phenomenal. I have Lindsay Pullman in there who does relationship trauma. I have Krista St. Germain who's been on your podcast. I have Leah Davidson in there. I have people that support my coaches in all of these things. So there's that. I offer another program to help coaches create their programs. And I mean that's pretty much it. So if this vibes with any of you or draws you in, go to mollyclaire.com or listen to the Masterful Coach podcast.
I love it. Thank you for all the good that you put out into the world. It's it's awesome, and I appreciate all the things that I've learned from you and just the great things that we've talked about today.
Thanks for
Well,
having me here.
thank you
Hey,
for being
you know what?
here.
I'm going to mention one more thing. I don't
Yeah.
talk about this a lot because it was kind of my book when I first started, but I do have a book, The Happy Mom Mindset. And so,
Yes.
anyone listening that's a
Yeah.
mom, there are really helpful things in there. You can just get it on Amazon Prime, and there's a workbook that you can actually get the digital version for free. So, that's another resource that might be really helpful.
Awesome.
Yeah,
And I will include all those. I'll include all those links in the show
perfect.
notes. So,
Okay,
okay.
sounds
Well,
good.
thank you so much. And that's everything I've got for you today, my friends. Make a great week and mwah!